You know, I've studied the mind, I've studied spirit, and I've studied people for over half a century, and I have come to learn something profound, that the quietest places often carry the loudest truths. And inside one such place, a modest, still, humble church, I began to uncover not just doctrine, but destiny, not just tradition, but transformation. There is a deep, often overlooked truth in the idea that stillness holds more power than motion. In a world addicted to noise, activity, and external validation, it's easy to dismiss the profound strength that lives in silence. Yet inside that quiet church, surrounded not by fanfare but by focused faith, something begins to shift. The stillness becomes a space, not of emptiness, but of extraordinary presence. It's within that presence that the mind begins to quiet its endless chatter and the spirit starts to rise. The power of stillness is not in what it avoids, but in what it invites. It invites clarity. It invites reflection. It invites transformation from within. Stillness is not inaction. It is the deliberate choice to listen instead of react, to feel instead of rush, to connect instead of control. In the Adventist journey, that quiet is not an escape from life. It's a confrontation with it, but from a higher place. It's a recalibration of what really matters. You begin to realize that stillness is not just the absence of sound, it's the presence of God. It is in that quiet space that you can hear the whispers of purpose that get drowned out by the world's shouting. It is in that stillness that the lessons of faith, patience, and perseverance are not just taught, but deeply understood. When you sit in that quiet church, you begin to see that every silence holds sacred potential. Your mind begins to notice what your heart has been feeling all along. The structure of the space, the rhythm of the services, the deliberate pauses, they're not ornamental. They are designed to slow the mind, to center the soul, to awaken you to your inner power. The Adventist way doesn't aim to entertain, it aims to elevate. And that elevation often begins in stillness. It's a spiritual technology, one that doesn't run on noise or speed, but on presence and intent. The stillness allows your thoughts to surface without judgment. In that sacred pause, old wounds begin to speak, not to hurt you, but to heal. You begin to notice how fast you've been running, how loudly you've been thinking, and how little you've been truly listening. This is the paradox. The quieter you become, the more you hear. The more you hear, the deeper you understand. Not just scripture, but yourself. And understanding yourself is the beginning of transforming yourself. That's what the quiet church teaches, not through loud commands, but through the unshakable authority of inner peace. The world may tell you that to succeed you have to hustle, shout, promote, and push. But inside the quiet church, you learn a different law. You learn that stillness is a magnet. It attracts insight. It draws in clarity. It makes space for divine wisdom to enter. In that place, you're not being passive. You're being positioned. Positioned to receive, to rebuild, to reimagine. You're learning to trust that when the noise fades, what remains is real. What remains is powerful. What remains is you, aligned and aware. Stillness is where you meet the version of yourself that's been buried under layers of distraction, is where you come face to face with the voice of your Creator, the blueprint of your purpose, and the healing you've been praying for. The quiet doesn't weaken you. It strengthens your inner resolve. It doesn't hide your power. It reveals it. You begin to see that what you thought was emptiness is actually fullness without clutter. You realize that you don't need to scream to be heard by God. You only need to be still enough to listen. Discipline and devotion are two forces that appear rigid on the surface, but together they unlock a freedom that few people ever experience. The common misconception is that discipline is restrictive, that it limits pleasure and spontaneity, but in reality, it is the very foundation that allows true purpose to unfold. Inside that quiet church where each practice, each tradition, each act of worship is steeped in intentionality, it becomes evident that structure is not the enemy of freedom, it is its beginning. Devotion without discipline is like fire without form, passion without purpose, and discipline without devotion becomes hollow, mechanical, lifeless. But when the two unite, something remarkable begins to happen within the soul. Every step in the Adventist journey, from the sacredness of the Sabbath to the mindful stewardship of health and time, is shaped by a consistent commitment to higher living. That consistency becomes a vessel through which devotion deepens. The repeated actions are not meaningless rituals. They are rehearsals for alignment, for integrity, for living every moment in tune with a higher calling. This is not about control. This is about mastery. And mastery is never a product of chaos. It is born from the quiet repetition of right actions, fueled by deep love and purpose. That's what you begin to feel when you witness the daily lives of those truly committed to this path. There is a peace in their predictability, a sacredness in their habits, and a quiet strength that comes from knowing why they do what they do. When the world outside is constantly shifting, changing, demanding more and offering less, discipline becomes a shield, a compass, a fortress. You no longer drift through life reacting to every pressure. You begin to act from principle. And when that principle is grounded in devotion to something greater than yourself, your life becomes more than functional. It becomes meaningful. The beauty is that this kind of discipline isn't imposed from outside. It is drawn from within. It grows from a place of reverence, of understanding that life is not random and that greatness is not accidental. When you're devoted to a divine purpose, discipline becomes a joyful sacrifice, not a burden. Inside the quiet church, you can feel that intentional energy. You can see it in the order of service, in the care given to every word spoken, in the time taken to reflect, to breathe, to observe. That environment doesn't rush you, it refines you. And in that refinement, you begin to see how your personal life can follow the same principle. You learn to set boundaries, not out of fear, but out of focus. You learn to say no to distraction so you can say yes to your calling. You learn that showing up when it's hard is what separates dreamers from doers, and that devotion alone will not carry you. It must be anchored in daily, deliberate discipline. Even the smallest acts, rising early, preparing your space, choosing words carefully, eating with intention, begin to hold weight. They no longer feel mundane, they feel sacred. This shift in mindset is what builds momentum, because discipline is not just about big sacrifices. It's about the consistent honoring of small promises. And those small promises build self-respect. They build trust between you and your purpose. That's what gives your devotion power. It's not just a feeling in your heart, but a pattern in your actions. Every step you take in discipline is a step deeper into devotion. Every boundary you honor becomes a doorway into spiritual strength. You start to recognize that the freedom you've been searching for, the confidence, the clarity, the courage, it doesn't come from ease. It comes from commitment. It comes from choosing the narrow road every day, not because you have to, but because you want to. Honor the divine within you. Faith is not just an idea or a belief. It is a vibration, a frequency, an energetic alignment with something greater than yourself. It's not merely something you think about on Sundays or speak about when life gets hard. It is something you live, something you tune into like a signal, broadcast from the divine. Inside the quiet church, you begin to feel that frequency. It moves beneath the hymns. It whispers through the scriptures. It radiates in the stillness. And the more attuned you become, the more you realize that this isn't about religion in the traditional sense. It's about resonance. When your mind, body, and spirit all come into harmony with that divine signal, life begins to respond in ways that defy logic and transcend circumstance. There's a power that exists beyond sight, beyond sound, beyond the physical realm, and that power is always broadcasting. Most people never hear it because they're not on the right frequency. They're tuned into doubt, fear, anger, and distraction. But faith is the exact opposite. Faith is the deliberate choice to tune into the station that says all things are possible. It is the courage to align with what cannot be seen, but what is more real than anything visible. Inside the Adventist tradition, this alignment is cultivated not through emotional highs, but through daily, grounded practice. It's about being consistent with your thoughts, your beliefs, your actions. When your internal state begins to reflect divine order, your external world starts to shift accordingly. The human mind is a transmitter and a receiver. What you believe, you begin to project. And what you project, you attract. This is why faith is not passive. It is an active force. When you truly believe in the power of God working through you, you begin to walk differently, speak differently, make decisions differently. You stop asking if something is possible and start preparing for when it happens. That's faith on frequency. It's not begging the universe, it's partnering with it. It's not hoping you'll be enough, it's knowing that you were designed with purpose, and that purpose resonates at a high frequency. The journey through Adventism teaches this not by accident, but by design. The commitment to rest, to community, to health, to discipline, all raises your internal vibration. It cleanses the clutter, quiets the noise, and sharpens your spiritual senses. You begin to hear the subtle signals that were always there, guiding you, pulling you closer to truth. Your faith becomes more than words. It becomes your atmosphere. It becomes a lens through which you see challenges as opportunities and setbacks as setups. You begin to understand that nothing real is ever threatened and nothing aligned can ever be lost. That level of awareness doesn't come from trying harder. It comes from tuning deeper. Faith also teaches you to release control, not because you're giving up, but because you're aligning with a force that sees more than you do. You learn to let go of timelines, to detach from outcomes, and instead focus on your vibration. You begin to ask, am I in harmony with what I say I believe? And if the answer is no, you adjust, not out of guilt, but out of growth. That's when doors start opening. That's when clarity returns. That's when relationships improve, health stabilizes, ideas flow, and synchronicity increases. None of it is random. It's all feedback. It's all frequency. When you walk by faith, you stop living by reaction and start living by creation. You realize you are not a victim of the world. You are a vessel of higher order. That realization changes everything. You no longer chase miracles, you become one. You no longer seek approval, you radiate purpose. You no longer fear uncertainty, you embrace it as part of the divine unfolding. And through it all, you remain connected not just in belief, but in vibration to the source of all life. Prophetic vision is not about predicting the future in vague, mystical terms. It is about seeing beyond the limitations of the present moment with spiritual clarity and conviction. It is the ability to perceive what is possible, even when everything around you seems stagnant or broken. Inside the quiet church, the essence of prophecy is not just locked in ancient scrolls or distant revelations. It's alive in the daily decisions of people who choose to live with purpose. The Adventist journey teaches that prophecy is not simply information about what is to come. It is an invitation to prepare, to purify, to align with the greater flow of divine destiny that is already unfolding. When you begin to truly understand prophetic vision, you realize it is less about external foresight and more about internal insight. It's about learning to see your life from a higher perspective, not from fear, not from lack, not from pressure, but from purpose. That shift changes everything. You stop asking what's going to happen next and start asking who you need to become to meet what's coming. The prophets of old didn't just speak about nations rising or falling. They called people to a deeper standard, to awaken their conscience, to return to values that anchored life in righteousness and resilience. That same call still echoes today, not through thunder, but through quiet, steady conviction. Vision is the ability to see a promised land while still walking through the desert. It is the clarity that comes when you stop defining your future by your past. When you immerse yourself in the rhythm of a prophetic life, you begin to prepare, not out of panic, but out of purpose. Every decision becomes infused with meaning. You read differently. You pray differently. You plan differently. There is no longer a separation between the spiritual and the practical, because they are now flowing in one direction. You don't just make moves based on logic, you make them based on light. That's prophetic vision in motion. Inside the quiet church, you begin to notice how time itself is treated differently. It's not something to waste, it's something to redeem. The weekly Sabbath becomes a practice of prophetic alignment, a pause that reminds you this world is not the final destination. It trains your heart to wait well, to work diligently, and to hope relentlessly. That combination is what separates the prophetic life from the reactive one. The world reacts to headlines. The prophetic soul responds to a higher headline, one written long before any newspaper ever existed. That mindset keeps you grounded when the world shakes. It keeps you hopeful when things fall apart. It keeps you clear when others are confused. Prophetic vision also shapes how you see people. You no longer judge based on appearances or status. You begin to discern calling, potential, and pain. You realize that every person is in a process, and the way you respond to them can either encourage their growth or hinder it. This kind of vision isn't popular because it requires patience, prayer, and perspective. But once you see with prophetic eyes, you can't go back to shallow perception. You start seeing what others miss. You start preparing in ways others neglect. And that preparation becomes power. What prophecy ultimately offers is not fear, but focus. It sharpens your spiritual senses, wakes up your sleeping potential, and compels you to take responsibility for the life you've been given. You stop blaming circumstances and start building character. You stop chasing outcomes and start cultivating obedience. That inner shift becomes your advantage. You're no longer guessing where your life is going. You're guided. You're no longer trying to cooperate with it. And as that cooperation deepens, you find that you're no longer just reading prophecy. You are becoming a fulfillment of it in motion. The law of spiritual accountability is one of the most powerful principles that governs both the natural and supernatural dimensions of life. It is the unseen current that flows through every decision, every thought, every word spoken in secret, and every action taken in the open. Inside the quiet church, you begin to feel the weight of that law, not as a burden, but as a blessing. It teaches that nothing you do is without consequence, and nothing sown in faith, obedience, or love ever returns void. This law is not a threat, it's a covenant. It is the divine assurance that your life matters, your choices matter, and you are never living in a vacuum. Spiritual accountability is not about punishment. It's about alignment. It's about living in integrity with divine design. You are constantly planting seeds through your attitude, your habits, your relationships, and every seed has a destiny. The law simply ensures that destiny unfolds according to the nature of what was sown. If you sow bitterness, you cannot reap peace. If you sow discipline, you will reap stability. If you sow generosity, you will eventually experience overflow. This law is woven into the Adventist life through its emphasis on preparation, stewardship, and responsibility. There is no room for spiritual laziness when you understand that your life is a field and your faith is the hand that plants in it. Inside the quiet church, this law is not shouted from the pulpit. It's lived in the daily rhythm of the people. From honoring the Sabbath to managing time, health, and resources, there is a deep respect for cause and effect. It's not legalism, it's awareness. It's choosing to live by design rather than by default. And once you step into that level of awareness, you can no longer make careless decisions. You begin to understand that what you feed will grow, what you neglect will decay, and what you honor will bless you in return. This shifts your entire approach to life. You no longer just want results. You want roots. You want to build something that stands the test of time. Spiritual accountability also brings clarity. It strips away excuses and exposes the truth. It asks you to stop blaming others, your past, or your circumstances, and to start owning your role in the narrative of your life. This doesn't mean condemning yourself. It means confronting yourself with love and honesty. You begin to ask deeper questions. What am I aligning with? What am I attracting through my beliefs? What am I reinforcing through my routines? These questions aren't meant to shame, they're meant to sharpen. Because when you know better, you do better. And when you do better, you attract better. This law also works in seasons. Just like a farmer doesn't reap immediately after planting, your spiritual harvest takes time. But accountability doesn't disappear in the waiting. It is in the waiting that your consistency is tested, your patience is developed, and your faith is refined. Many give up because they misread the delay as denial. But in the Adventist perspective, waiting is often the space where God does his deepest work. The law is always at work, even when results aren't visible. That's why you must keep sowing good seeds, even when you feel overlooked or discouraged, because the harvest is promised. It's just not always immediate. When you truly embrace spiritual accountability, you begin to walk differently. You no longer chase hype or quick fixes. You build slow, steady, strong. You no longer depend on external validation. You operate from internal conviction. You no longer run from responsibility. You rise into it. And in doing so, you become a person of integrity, resilience, and purpose. The kind of person who not only believes in transformation, but lives it daily, because you understand that everything counts, everything echoes, and everything returns in multiplied form. Community is not just about proximity or shared space. It is about shared purpose, shared values, and a shared journey towards something higher. Inside the quiet church, community is not defined by loud gatherings or surface-level interactions, but by a deep, intentional connection rooted in faith. It's a space where people come, not just to be seen, but to be known, not just to socialize, but to strengthen. And that kind of connection builds more than relationships. It builds resilience. In a world where isolation has become a silent epidemic, the Adventist way of community becomes a sanctuary of spiritual support and accountability. When you walk into that environment, there is a sense of belonging that transcends words. It's not just because of the warm greetings or familiar faces. It's because you sense that everyone is moving in the same direction. There is a collective rhythm of worship, of rest, of service that binds individuals into something greater than themselves. This unity doesn't erase individuality, it amplifies it. In true community, people are not asked to become identical, they are called to become aligned with values that uplift, with habits that heal, and with a mission that matters beyond personal gain. That's why community is not a luxury, it's a lifeline. It keeps you grounded when life tries to uproot you. It reminds you who you are when you forget. It reflects back to you the image of your potential when all you can see is your struggle. The people around you in faith are not there to impress you. They are there to impact you. Through prayer, encouragement, correction, and example, they shape you, and you shape them. This mutual shaping is sacred. It's how iron sharpens iron. It's how growth multiplies. And it's how you learn that healing doesn't always happen in solitude. It often happens in togetherness. Within the Adventist model, community is intentionally nurtured through shared rituals, shared rest, and shared responsibility. The Sabbath, for instance, becomes more than a pause. It becomes a gathering point, a spiritual reset that's done together. Meals are shared not just for sustenance, but for connection. Time is valued not just for productivity, but for presence. These practices are not outdated traditions. They are timeless strategies for human flourishing. They remind us that we were never meant to walk alone, and that power multiplies when hearts are united in purpose. Community also brings balance. Where one is weak, another is strong. Where one is weary, another is willing. This balance isn't accidental, it's designed. The strengths of the many cover the needs of the few. And in that covering, you begin to see the reflection of divine order. It's a living body, each part essential, each role honored. This removes the ego and replaces it with empathy. It breaks down pride and builds up compassion. In a society obsessed with individualism, this kind of unity is revolution. It says, you don't have to have it all together. You just have to show up, stay honest, and stay connected. Real community will challenge you. It will confront your blind spots, your inconsistencies, your excuses. But it will also champion your progress. celebrate your wins, and carry you through the valley. It doesn't promise perfection, it promises presence. And that presence becomes healing in itself. You begin to understand that restoration doesn't just come from divine intervention. It often comes from divine interaction. The person beside you in the pew might be the answer to the prayer you've been too tired to speak. The embrace after service might be the reminder that you're not forgotten. The testimony you hear might be the spark that reignites your own hope. When you commit to real community, you're no longer operating as a lone soldier. You're part of a spiritual family. You begin to carry each other's burdens, yes, but also each other's dreams. You learn that we rise together or not at all. You realize that your breakthrough isn't just personal, it's collective. Every time you grow, everyone around you grows. Every time you heal, a piece of the community heals. Every time you show up authentically, you give others permission to do the same.